smiling with truth, feeling better. Found a new man that I want for mine. Learned my lesson, electric star. Oh, how is the world?
When Linda Ronstadt dominated American radio in the 1970s, she didn't just become successful, she became symbolic. With chart-topping albums and Grammy recognition, she represented excellence in an industry that rarely handed center stage to women. But public success creates something larger than achievement, it creates expectation. Once audiences attach identity to a voice, every performance must confirm the myth. Every album must justify the legend. The applause grows louder, and so does the pressure to remain flawless. For many artists, fame is momentum. For Ronstadt, it was responsibility. If you appreciate thoughtful analysis of iconic careers, please like, subscribe, and share your perspective in the comments below. Before superstardom, there was persistence. For Linda Ronstadt, the defining breakthrough came in 1974 with the release of Heart Like a Wheel. Although she had earlier recognition with the Stone Ponies and the hit Different Drum, it was this solo album that decisively altered her professional trajectory. Heart Like a Wheel reached #1 on the Billboard 200 and produced major singles including You're No Good and When Will I Be Loved. The album also earned her a Grammy Award for Best Female Country Vocal Performance. These were not incremental gains, they were structural shifts. She was no longer a promising voice navigating the margins of folk rock. She became a commercial and critical center of gravity. The timing mattered. The early 1970s American music industry was consolidating around arena rock and established male-fronted acts. Female performers were visible, but rarely positioned as dominant forces in album-oriented rock. Ronstadt's success disrupted that imbalance without relying on spectacle. Her authority came from vocal precision, interpretive discipline, and carefully chosen material. What distinguished this breakthrough was not merely sales volume. It demonstrated that a woman could lead a major label project that competed directly with the era's most powerful acts and win. Radio programmers took notice. So did record executives. She became a reliable headliner, not a supporting feature. The breakthrough also reshaped expectations around her career. Once Heart Like a Wheel succeeded at that scale, repetition was no longer enough. Each subsequent release would be measured against a new benchmark of excellence. That pressure fundamentally altered her professional landscape. Most importantly, the album solidified her public image as a cross-genre force, equally credible in rock and country spaces. That flexibility would later become a strategic asset, but in 1974 it signaled something even more consequential: she was not confined by category. She had leverage. That moment didn't simply launch a career. It redefined her position within the industry's power structure. If you value thoughtful, in-depth analysis of iconic careers, subscribe and share your perspective in the comments. By the late 1970s, Linda Ronstadt was no longer rising, she was established. Multiple platinum albums, arena tours, and Grammy recognition placed her at the center of American popular music. But sustained visibility introduces a different kind of challenge: maintenance. Success creates momentum, fame creates scrutiny. Media coverage during this period increasingly framed her as the Queen of Rock. That title elevated her stature, but it also narrowed perception. When the public turns a performer into a symbol, nuance disappears. Every vocal imperfection, every artistic shift, becomes magnified. Ronstadt openly acknowledged that she experienced persistent stage fright and self-doubt, even at the height of her acclaim. Rather than publicly dramatizing that tension, she adopted a disciplined approach. Her mantra was simple: breathe, then sing. That response reveals something strategic. She did not attempt to reshape her personality to match the image. She managed performance rather than persona. In an era when publicity machines were growing more aggressive, she limited immersion in Hollywood culture. She was known for maintaining a private home life, avoiding unnecessary spectacle. That separation between stage identity and personal boundaries helped her retain credibility. Professionally, her choices reflected similar calculation. Instead of repeating a single formula that guaranteed commercial safety, she broadened her repertoire. She supported emerging musicians in her touring band, some of whom would later form major acts. That decision was not about charity, it reflected confidence. She understood that surrounding herself with strong collaborators strengthened her own musical authority. Most critically, she resisted being locked into one genre. While many artists in peak commercial phases doubled down on predictable sound, Ronstadt prepared the ground for future shifts. Her ability to move between rock, country, and later other formats was not spontaneous experimentation. It was controlled expansion. Each transition was grounded in vocal capability and disciplined rehearsal rather than reinvention for attention. Managing fame, in her case, meant controlling exposure and diversifying artistic identity before market forces demanded it. She did not wait for decline to pivot. She positioned herself for longevity while still on top. That discipline separated popularity from endurance. She understood that public affection fluctuates, but structural control over one's career creates stability. If you appreciate clear, balanced analysis of how artists sustain long-term influence, subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. As the 1980s unfolded, Linda Ronstadt moved from dominance to deliberate expansion. This phase of her career was not about louder success, it was about deeper control. Having already proven her commercial strength in rock and country, she no longer needed validation through chart repetition. She needed ownership over direction. One of the most decisive examples was her turn toward traditional Mexican music in the late 1980s. Rather than reinforcing her established rock identity, she recorded Spanish-language albums rooted in the mariachi and folk traditions of her upbringing. This was not a crossover attempt designed for trend alignment. It was a return to artistic origin. By choosing repertoire tied to family history and cultural heritage, she repositioned her brand from mainstream rock figure to multidimensional American artist. The strategic value of that decision was profound. It expanded her audience base while also insulating her reputation from generational shifts in rock music. Instead of aging within one genre, she diversified across musical traditions. That diversification increased both creative authority and long-term relevance. Her move into Broadway with the Pirates of Penzance further reinforced this pattern. Musical theater required technical discipline distinct from arena performance. Accepting that challenge signaled seriousness rather than novelty. It demonstrated that her musicianship could withstand structural rigor outside of popular formats. The role earned critical recognition and strengthened her standing as a vocalist with range beyond commercial radio. Throughout this period, her approach reflected increasing career architecture. She selected projects aligned with skill development and legacy rather than short-term market positioning. She worked with producers and arrangers who respected vocal integrity. She retained strong influence over song selection, an often overlooked element of artistic control. The singer who once navigated industry expectations had become the primary decision-maker in defining her own repertoire. Equally important was her restraint. She did not overexpose herself across every available platform. Visibility was selective, tied to substance. That choice preserved the value of her appearances and protected the seriousness of her work. Expansion, in her case, was not expansion for scale. It was expansion for sovereignty. By broadening genres, refining collaborations, and aligning projects with personal conviction, she transitioned from performer shaped by industry forces to architect shaping her own professional environment. As decades of success accumulated, Linda Ronstadt began redefining achievement on her own terms. The shift was not abrupt. It was gradual, deliberate, and revealing. Sustained fame requires energy, sustainable fame requires boundaries. By the early 1990s, Ronstadt made a deeply personal decision to adopt 2 children. This was not framed publicly as a retreat from music, but it did recalibrate her priorities. Touring, recording, and constant travel demand mobility and unpredictability. Parenthood requires stability. Rather than attempting to sustain the same pace indefinitely, she adjusted her professional rhythm to reflect that reality. This adjustment marked a broader transformation. Visibility became selective. She did not pursue constant media presence, nor did she attempt to compete with emerging trends for relevance. Instead, she focused on projects that aligned with her evolving life structure. That choice protected both her artistic integrity and her personal commitments. Later, when neurological illness progressively affected her ability to sing, she made another defining decision. She stepped away from performing rather than continue below her own standards. For an artist whose identity had long been associated with vocal excellence, that choice carried weight. It signaled that preservation of quality mattered more than prolonging exposure. Importantly, this transition was handled without spectacle. There was no dramatic attempt to reclaim spotlight or extend a farewell cycle. She acknowledged limitations and redirected her energy toward family and reflection. In doing so, she modeled a form of professional closure that emphasized dignity over denial. Throughout this stage, she maintained public respect without cultivating constant public presence. Her recordings remained influential, her honors intact, her legacy secure. She did not attempt to manufacture relevance. She allowed time to perform its natural function. Sustainable fame depends on understanding when expansion serves growth and when restraint preserves identity. Ronstadt's later years illustrate that distinction clearly. She neither clung to the stage nor distanced herself from her history. She accepted transition as part of professional maturity. In stepping back intentionally, she demonstrated that longevity is not measured solely by duration in the spotlight, but by the ability to leave it without losing oneself. Long after the charts have shifted and the arena lights have dimmed, the career of Linda Ronstadt remains a study in durability. Her legacy is not anchored solely in record sales or awards, though those were substantial. It rests in how she navigated success without surrendering authorship over her direction. Her early triumphs proved technical excellence. Her mid-career risks demonstrated strategic intelligence. Her later decisions revealed discipline. Together, those phases form a coherent arc: achievement, control, and intentional transition. Success, in her case, was never treated as entitlement. It was treated as responsibility. Each breakthrough raised expectations, and she responded not by retreating into repetition but by expanding capability. She shifted genres when she could have remained commercially safe. She accepted the vulnerability of new formats rather than rely on established formulas. That pattern illustrates a crucial professional lesson: adaptability is not abandonment of identity, it is reinforcement of it. Autonomy is the second pillar of her legacy. Throughout decades of public recognition, she retained influence over repertoire, collaborations, and timing. Even her departure from performance reflected agency. Choosing when to stop can be as powerful as choosing when to begin. In industries driven by constant visibility, restraint can signal strength. The third lesson concerns sustainability. Endurance requires boundaries. She demonstrated that a career does not have to burn at maximum intensity to remain meaningful. By adjusting priorities and stepping back deliberately, she protected both her personal life and her professional reputation. The result is a legacy largely defined by respect rather than controversy. From a balanced analytical perspective, her journey suggests something particularly resonant for mature audiences: lasting influence is rarely the product of a single peak. It is the accumulation of disciplined choices over time. Talent opens the door. Strategy keeps it open. Self-awareness determines when to walk through and when to step aside. Fame captures attention. Character sustains legacy. If you value thoughtful reflections on enduring careers, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your perspective in the comments below.